You know, it's pretty clear that, you know, you come from a family that believes in God, that was raised to believe in God. Your dad was a pastor, a preacher. At one time, when she tells the story about the medicine, you know, they were living in the back of a church when you were just a baby and poor, but loving it.
that was in Hammond, Louisiana. I was just a toddler, and I talk about often that, you know, nowadays you have to have so many kids programs. You know, people won't go to church unless they have something for all their kids to do. I was raised on the church pew. We didn't have kids programs, you know, at the time. And as a matter of fact, and my mom could tell this story with more accuracy because I was just a toddler.
Yeah.
But they were living in the back of the church. The church was in the front part. The house was in the back part.
Yeah.
And so it was after Sunday night church, and they were back in the house or the living quarters or whatever, and there was a little knock at the door. And she opened the door, and there was Keith. They left me asleep under the pew. I don't know why they didn't say, "Where's our kid?"
Right.
It was only one of me at the time.
Well, you know, there was a story about Jesus like that too, I think, where they walked out of town.
But
is it his father's house?
I think the story has something to do with, you know, a young pastor family with a small kid. Somebody's always got the kid, right? You know, this one or whatever. And so they just thought, well, somebody else had me.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything but church. The pastor brought my mother and I home from the hospital when I was born.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing, you know, really knew.
Right.
And I received Jesus when I was 10, and just really fell in love with him. He was my friend. He was real. And our church services and the people there and the things that I learned from, there was about 3 rows of precious, precious women. The older saints widows, and you know, that were able to pour into your life. You know, you heard their testimonies, and you knew the life they lived, and you could just see Jesus in them, and just never wanted anything else but Jesus. You know, so
raised on the church pew, and even beyond that, my dad's parents were very faithful. Went to a Baptist church, but I know them to be, you know, very godly people. My dad's grandmother, Olive, it's spelled like olive, but her name is Olive, Chanda Alexis. I have her Bible in there. She was a Pentecostal preacher as a grandmother, and so that Bible passed on to my dad, and then later my dad passed that on to me. And then my mom was from a very, very godly family, and just dear saints of God. My grandpa has stories of, he was a farmer, a peanut farmer in West Texas for a long time, and there was one particular story I remember that, I mean, it was a bad drought that year, and I mean, everybody was about to lose their crops, and he prayed for rain, and it rained on his property only.
Oh, wow.
And just things like that. There was another story, another story where a hailstorm came through and just beat crops all around him, but his was untouched. And so, you know, that's kind of the things that was passed down, you know, and people didn't know how to pray and you know, touch heaven. And so at a young age, I'm surrounded by this, you know, by these stories and by these people of faith pouring into me. And so it's easy in that situation. It's almost cheating.
Yeah.
You know, when you're surrounded with that. You know, I don't have one of those stories where, you know, I had to, you know, had a horrible life and I had to scratch out a faith in God out of that. I mean, I was surrounded by you know, such godly people, and we were involved in ministry when I was. The way I like to tell the story sometimes is that I was a kindergarten dropout and that our family was homeless for 3.5 years, which is true. I dropped out of kindergarten because we were going on the evangelistic field, and that was back in the day when revivals were from Sunday morning to Friday night, and then you traveled on Saturdays. So we literally didn't have a home for 3.5 years. Every week we were in a different place, so I was homeless for 3.5 years. But except for that short period of time where we had a camper, I guess that's your.
Yeah.
But we were always active in the ministry. I got to sing from the platform when I was just a little kid, and even running for some of the kids crusades and stuff like that. I was involved in running the media, you know, sound and lights, and you know, and not that I understood it. It was like, okay, Keith, when I see this, you turn that button. that kind of thing. So, but my dad was real active in ministry, and there was a lot of he was a very well-known person, especially in like the Louisiana and Texas districts, and I couldn't, even when I got a little older, I couldn't go anywhere without being Brother Bud's son, and so that's why when we moved to Arkansas, my parents came to visit, and I was youth pastor at Westside Assembly of God at the time, and so my parents came to visit, came to church, and the pastor from the pulpit recognized Keith's mom and dad, and I was like, yes, finally, I'm somebody, and they're attached to me now.
When did you say get saved for you?
When I was about 8.
About 8, and that was going to church with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
In the same church that we got married in.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So where was that?
And we strong Christians, and I don't know if I've ever met anybody like my grandma.
Ooh.
And so,
What was her name?
Berta Folks. She is wonderful. I mean, she prayed for all of us grandkids, and there was I have a cousin who his parents didn't even take him to church when he was growing up. Never went to church at home, and he lived in Florida. But he would come and see my grandmother, or my grandmother would go down there every summer and visit for like 2 months and then come back. But she prayed for, well, it's not the only one, she prayed for all of us, but he's an example. But she prayed for him, and now he's a Royal Ranger commander. And she didn't know that when she was alive, but all that's happened since his getting saved and being in the church, and now his parents are saved, and it's because my grandmother prayed for him, and then he got saved, and then he brought his parents in, and she would just be astounded at what's happened in the lives of her grandchildren, both that one and farther. So that's my heritage, my grandmother and my grandfather and my mom.
First experience being filled with the Holy Spirit when I was 8 years old, and just walking with God. And that doesn't mean I was always perfect or anything like that. I was, I had my turn getting in trouble just like everybody else. And,
sure.
I remember
preachers' kids are
going in circles while my dad was whipping me with the belt. Yeah, we got whippings. And so he was beating me with a belt when I was 12 years old, and I was saying, I won't do it no more, I won't do it no more, and I didn't. But, so we wanted to instill in our kids and for them to have a faith of their own, and I'm so proud of, I guess you're going to talk to my daughter in just a
we'll
while,
talk to Chanda.
There's Chanda.
And Brad back there. So you guys have been in ministry also, right? Now tell me about, that was like surprise. Yeah, you're on camera.
Bottom line, you can't make your kids be saved. Mm-hmm. That's an individual choice, right? You can't make them be saved. But what you can do as a parent is build up their storehouse of knowledge, so you can have them memorize scripture, you can bring them to church every time the doors are open, you can pray with them, you can teach them how to worship in home, you can get them into the habit of studying their Bible and teach them what it means and things like that. And so you can build up their wealth of knowledge, and then whenever they become saved and surrender to Jesus, whether that's at 5 or 50, then they will already have all this knowledge at their fingertips. They won't have to build up from scratch themselves. They will already have all this that they can just start sweeping out. And
they don't need the pamphlet that says this is what it. You know what I'm
this is
saying?
what you do next.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. When you get saved and you know nothing, they have to hand you a pamphlet. So you need to go and read the Bible. You need to start here. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I get
But if you're like us, if you have a legacy, I feel like that's what was there for me, and then that's what I keep in mind for my kids is I can't make them be saved, but I can teach them what it means and show them what it looks like, and give them a storehouse of knowledge at their fingertips. So when that day happens, that they won't have to just build it from scratch. They've got all of that with them, and they can just start connecting dots and using it.
And I think we approach that and we've talked about this before, where we were missionaries and college campus, and we're in ministry now, and try to evangelize and disciple, but really our kids are our biggest mission field. like we can, that's what's important to us, like, is our kids, because for one, we want them to love God and be saved, but we do want to continue that legacy to me. And so and I even see that with Nova when he asks questions, because he asks some pretty deep questions that even challenge my theology sometimes. And like, I don't know how to, the 5-year-old, or sometimes when he was 4, just these questions, but
I'm surprised you're asking the question, so we don't know if we should give you a simple answer or just go for it.
The other earth.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
He loves the new earth.
Yeah. So
He does.
We-
He prays for it all the time. He prays for the new earth.
So
He tells God what kinds of stuff should be in the new earth.
So we answer, in a way that
He also wants the ivory billed woodpecker back.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah. West Texas, and Bud, our final place was Oceanside, California, where Bud had found Christ when he was in the Marine Corps.
Oh,
The people in Oceanside, the young people, had held a service at the USO, and there was a serviceman that was so lonely. He drank, he did everything to fill the vacuum in his heart, nothing satisfied. But these young people were so friendly and made friends with him, and he began to go to church, but it was 6 months before he received Jesus into his heart. But when he got out of the Marine Corps and went straight to Southwestern to Bible College, he always had a desire to go back, and he wanted me to meet the people who had brought him to Christ and discipled him. They discipled him. And so that we headed out. And as we went to West Texas, had meetings on, New Mexico. We was working our way to California. When we got to just outside of Gallup, New Mexico, going toward Arizona, to cross the line, we got on the New Mexico-Arizona line, and there was a truck stop there, just a small cafe, but kind of like a truck, because there wasn't any, it was just flat land everywhere. But we stopped there for breakfast. Everybody went in except one of the girls was too sleepy. She says, I want to stay in the car. So we left her in the car to sleep. We went in to eat. And a little bit of highway patrolman came into the cafe, and he says, I don't know who has this 56 Chevrolet out here, but it's on fire. And so Bud jumped up, ran out there. The inside of the car was just full of smoke. And he unlocked it, jerked open the door, jerked her out, and she was still, she had inhaled that smoke. It was, it was bad. But they got the fire out, the wiring harness, or whatever you call it, under a car, under the hood, had caught on fire. So there we were on the line. We didn't know anybody. Our car was broke down. We were pulling a luggage trailer behind us. The highway patrolman called a wrecker service and went on his way. And the wrecker service came, hooked up to our car, and the men pushed our luggage trailer with everything we had from the summer beside that little cafe. And the wrecker service guy looked at us. There were 4 of us and him, that made 5. He has 1 cab in his truck, and but we all had to pile in there. So it's 2 people had to sit in 2 people's laps. And we made it, and he pulled us back to Gallup. Well, by this time it had started pouring down rain, torrential rain. And while we're going back to Gallup, we're just stunned. Nobody's saying anything. And finally, one of the girls said, will your insurance cover this? And Bud says, I don't even know, but it's State Farm. And so the guy that guy wouldn't talk to us. He knew. I mean, he thought these poor people, we were young college kids. And so he went downtown, Gallup, New Mexico. It's raining. I mean, just torrential rain. And the State Farm office is on Main Street here. He pulls up and he stops for us to get out. It's Saturday. So we are put out at the State Farm office on a Saturday. It's pouring down rain. Our car is being towed off. We don't even know where. Our luggage and all of our stuff is miles and miles back on the state line. And we're standing in rain in Gallup, New Mexico on a Saturday. And Bud looked in the office of State Farm. The man was sitting in there at his desk. Banged on the door. The man came and opened. We went in. The girls sat down on a little receiving area on a couch. We couldn't say a word to each other. We were all so stunned. We did not know what to do. We were sitting there on the couch. Bud went into the office with the State Farm man. They were filling out all the paperwork or whatever. And in walks a woman. She looks around at us. She doesn't know who we are, and we don't know who she is. And she sits down right across from us. And she just looks at us, and we look at her. And finally, she says, and told us who she was. She says, I'm a missionary for the Free Methodist, and I minister to on the reservation here. And this area is, the Navajo Nation is there, the Hopi, I don't know how you pronounce it, and then one other huge Native American reservation and people there. And she said, I'm a missionary for them. And so we told her who we were. And it wasn't long, we were just pouring out our story to her. And she just said, she's an older lady. And she said, I've been trying to get to this office all week. Every time I tried to get down here, something hindered me. And she said, today I was passing down the street and I saw a light on. And I said, I'm going to stop and see if he's in there. And she knew that God had brought her to us. Yeah. And she says, you're going home with me. Oh, and I'll take care of you until your car is fixed. Oh, and we'll have great fellowship. And she did. She made a wonderful meal and we had great fellowship. And the next day, she had an old truck. So Melvina and Sharon got to ride in the truck. Bud and I had to sit in the back. She had benches in the back of her truck. So we're sitting on the benches in the back of the truck. The rain finally stopped, thank goodness. And she goes bumping all over this reservation Sunday morning. And she pulls up to each little hogan and beats her horn. If they were coming to church, they came out. If they weren't, they just didn't come out. She just sat so long and then she went on. And these Native American people, precious people, they began to fill up the bed of that truck. We went on to church and they sang in their native language. And then we sang because we were a singing group. We got up there and we sang and we sang and we worshiped and we praised.
19 months.
He was 19 months.
19 months after Chanda,
and
our son was born. And when he was born, there was some issues, and they were trying to figure out what the issues were or whatever. And I was a youth pastor actually here in El Dorado at that time.
There were issues with both me and him.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could.
I had toxemia, which is called now preeclampsia, which is extreme hypertension. And my mom, I was at home. Keith was a youth pastor, and he actually had a youth event that day. And I'd been feeling really bad, and my mom said in prayer at her house, God told her to go to Terry and don't come home until the baby's born. And she packed a bag and came over immediately, which she never did because she was in school right then to be an RN.
Unannounced.
Yeah, she just showed up.
Wow.
And she said, I'm staying until the baby comes. And she said, God told me not to leave. And if she had not been there, I would have been at home alone. And I would not have gone to the hospital because I knew something was wrong. I had phlebitis in my legs, which comes with toxemia or preeclampsia, which is inflammation of the veins, and it was really bad. It causes blood clots and all kinds of stuff. And I was just bad sick and didn't know it. And my mom, he was at a youth function across town, and my mom said, we're going to the hospital, and we're going right now. And she took me to the hospital, and it's really a blur for me after that, but I know that you got there, and
yeah, they called me, and so I just told the people there, I just left it with them, I got to go.
Everything inside had torn loose, so I was bleeding internally, and Jamin wasn't getting oxygen. And so they told me that if my mom hadn't brought me right then, 30 minutes later, me and Jamin would have both been dead.
Yikes.
So But I don't remember so much
Yeah.
me being in the hospital. You can take it from there.
Well, anyway, so when I get there, and I've been through all the classes for, C-section and all that. So I was authorized to do it. But about the time I got there, actually I was getting off the elevator when Terry's mom and brother were getting on the elevator. They were going to go get some chips. When they got back up, Jamin was born. Okay, so that's how fast. But I walked in the room where Terry was, and then the doctor come in. I was basically slammed against the wall. Get back. They took her, and I wasn't even in the thought process. But that was okay. Just y'all do what you got to do. But there was something wrong, and so they had him under an oxygen tent. He wasn't getting enough oxygen or something, and so they had him on, and that was like 4 days of this, and so on day 4. They finally figured out that he had a hole in his heart. And so, all the medical terms, but
Is it VSD?
So VSD, QRZ, or whatever it was.
Ventricular septal defect.
There you go. Anyway, so they were going to have to airlift him to Little Rock, and this was late at night, and they said, hey, y'all come on up in the morning, no sense in coming tonight or whatever. And, that was kind of a difficult night. And so, I got her home, and then we go up to Little Rock, to Children's, and this was the morning of day 5 after his birth. And so the cardiologist, the child cardiologist. Anyway, she comes and she said, okay, let me explain to you what's going on. He does have the hole, but that's
not his only
not the only problem, and we're not even going to address that right now because he has what's called interrupted aorta. So the aorta had a gap in it, which is, the aorta is your blood leaves and goes to the rest of the body. But she said there's another vessel called a PDA. What's that stand for?
I can't remember.
So this PDA vessel, it bypasses the lungs in the babies
when
the baby's in the mother's womb, because the baby doesn't need its own lungs until after it's born.
Right.
So as soon as the baby's born, this vessel dissolves.
It closes up.
So that the baby starts using its own lungs. She said, but this vessel was also positioned. She said, and it all this happens within the first 24 hours. She said, but that vessel is positioned in a way that it was going around the interrupted aorta and allowing blood to get around that gap to the rest of the body. That's the only reason he's alive. Wow. And she said, we don't know why this vessel's still open. And I was sitting in like a office chair, kind of a rolly office chair, and I think that thing was quaking just like this. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And, that was a miracle, that God preserved Jamin's life during that. And you can tell we're still, we still feel it. Yeah. And so, anyway, so they put a piece of conduit in there, plastic pipe, basically some PVC from the hardware store or wherever they got it. And they put that in there. And then when he was 9 months old, he had to have open heart surgery to repair the hole. And then when he was 7 months old, 7 years old, I'm sorry. When he was 7 years old, he had to have another replacement of that tube because plastic doesn't grow. And so they had to put a larger one in there because of his growth. And they said now, because plastic doesn't grow, he's going to have an adult size one when he gets probably 18, 19 years old. And so, just preparing you for that. So from that point on, part of my regular prayer was, God, make plastic grow. They said it couldn't. But he never had to have another surgery.
And they said he had exceeded the height and weight that it was expected.
Yeah. And so, it's just miraculous what God did. And I don't know what, I don't know if plastic really grew or God just made the rest of the system take over or whatever, but God did that.
He makes a way.
That's right. And so that's just some things that we've seen in our lives, and more things like that. We've been through there were some times in our life when, like most marriages, we didn't get along very well, but we had determined that first of all, divorce was off the table. We just decided that up front. And so, we kind of had grown apart a little bit, but we still knew, okay, we got to make this work somehow. And God, we won't go into the whole story, but you know, God did a miracle in our lives there, and you know, and I mean, here we are, just past 33 years, 36 counting the 3 years that we dated. So
it was difficult. One, we were just married.
Yeah.
As missionaries, you're required to raise your support and, you know, things of that nature, and that was difficult. But with that said, it's one of the ways we saw God work is sometimes we didn't know how we were going to get groceries. I mean, we had some money, but not a whole lot.
We walked when we could. We rode our bikes when we could. We walked to the grocery store. And
you walked to the grocery store?
There was a couple times, yes.
Oh yeah, we did. There was, yeah.
And there, I think I shared this one already. But there were times like we printed our newsletters, and I was in charge of the campus pastors' newsletters as well, and I was supposed to print his and my newsletters at this church. But if you know Denton is big and spread out, and so to go to this church, you have to get up on the interstate, and you go down a couple exits, and that
was another thing that was difficult about living in traffic.
And you know, typically that's no big deal, but we couldn't afford the gas. And so there were times where I prayed over the gas tank, and I refused to look at the gauge. And because I couldn't put any money in it.
You had your car though. Didn't we have 2 vehicles?
Yeah, they were both paid off.
So we had to decide which one to fill up. So
I mean, there were times like that.
Or not fill up, just put some gas in.
Or I would, you know, ask the pastor, "Can I drive your car?" I think that only happened once, where I drove his car to go get something.
So it was difficult, but you know, we saw God come through. You know, it's not like we, you know, miraculously we were rolling in money, but you know, we never went without what we needed. And we so you know, so that's some of the ways we saw God come through. But for us personally, we look back on it now, and we really, you know, even though times were difficult, and you know, they say first year of marriage is the most difficult. I didn't really feel that much, because I felt like we kind of came together during that, because it was such a difficult spot we were in.
So life was challenging, but your marriage was good, is what you're saying. I mean, it wasn't that. I guess that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we had a lot of learning.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, we look back on it now and really see how much we grew in that. Just us, but also I know internship wise, and just the academic side of it, and the learning how to teach and things of that nature was really good for me, because it was one of those where you're just kind of put in the hot seat to like go out and evangelize on the campus. That was one thing that we did, was we just went out cold contact, strike up a conversation, which is very scary. But you know, learned how to do that, and you know, so it was a good growing experience. So, you know, looking back on it, I don't think that we missed anything. I think it was just God leading us. We didn't know what was exactly down the road, but it was God leading us to where we are now. So, hey buddy. It's okay. It's all right. You can get out now, okay?
Proverbs 3:5-6.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6.
Okay. Matthew 4:19.
Come, follow me, Jesus said. I'll soon be well. to fish for people. Matthew 4:19.
What's the first 5 books of the Bible?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy.
And what's it called?
The Pentateuch.
All right, say it really loud for me.
Trust in the Lord as your heart, then lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him, and He will make your path straight.
There you go. I know you know that scripture. Lots of distraction today. How many books of the Bible are there?
66.
Good job. Matthew 4:19.
Come, follow me to this. And I send you out and beg for people. John 8.
And you know, I guess both of our families, you know, it was when the doors of the church are open, unless your arm's like chopped off or something, you know, or
That's not enough.
Yeah.
you know, well, you can still walk, maybe your leg, but you know, you were just at church. It just, you know, it was just what you did. And of course, there's more to faith than just showing up at church.
Sure, absolutely.
But you know, it's such an important part that I think nowadays there's so many things that's trying to take the place of church. And you know, because we even made this where, you know, if something interferes, whether it be dance or t-ball or soccer or whatever the case, like if it interferes with church, like that other thing's just going to have to go.
Yeah.
And but see, the kids understand that. Like even during this whole pandemic thing, like they want to go to church. Like they think it's weird that we're not or weren't. I mean, we're going in.
I don't like watching it on TV.
Yeah, he wants. You know, so that's encouraging to us that, you know, they see the value, at least on a child's level as much as they can, the value of church.
Faith is a discipline. Paul even talks about that. Not this Paul, but the Paul of the Bible. He talks about, you know, that I discipline myself and I you know, even beat myself into submission. I've had to do that sometimes, but. When you have that, you know, I'm going to church, whatever attitude, that's not because I'm going to go to hell if I miss a Sunday, but it's a discipline. And when I discipline myself to put myself under teaching, to be with the people of God, to learn more, when those disciplines are in my life, then I can maintain my faith. I can stay on the path that God's put me on. But when you don't have any discipline, when you know, and that's why the legacy can exist, because, you know, my dad had a period of time where he wasn't living for the Lord, even though he was raised in church, and he was actually saved in the Marine Corps. You know, of all places, that's where usually, you know, be a good place to, you know, lose your faith, I guess, or whatever. But
drinking and cussing. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and he was doing all of that, but God saved him, and he turned around. You know, like when he got saved, he was saved. You know, and he quit all of that stuff. And the other guys in the barracks started calling him preacher. I mean, he's only been saved a few weeks, and they're already calling him preacher. He wasn't called to preach. He was barely, you know, knew how to read the Bible. But then God later did call him to preach. He actually went from the Marine Corps, discharged from the Marine Corps, straight to Bible college. You know, so that was a culture shock, I'm sure. But you know, those disciplines of the way that I was raised, and then the disciplines that I raised my kids, and now I see those disciplines in them, that's going to help them be able to pass it on to their kids. Not because it's a bunch of rules and do's and don'ts, but it is a series of disciplines that help us survive. Because, you know, sometimes when it gets tough, sometimes you don't feel like reading your Bible, or sometimes you don't feel like going to church, but it's a discipline in your life, and it helps you stay strong when things get tough.
Discipline's not bad. Discipline's a good thing.
And, you know, my hope too, like for our kids, when I say Mary Alexis kids and y'all's kids, is that they will have, I want them to have the discipline. I want them to have the teaching. I want them to have the full church experience. But what I want more than anything is for them to have a genuine divine encounter with God, to know the presence of God. Because that's what really changes a person's life. You know, when you get into God's presence, and you know, when I'm not saying it's all about the feeling, but when you encounter God, our God can be encountered. And better is one day in His courts than 1,000 elsewhere. When you encounter God and have a genuine, and that can be different for different people, lots of different things. But that's why, you know, and I think about if your dad was an evangelist, I would expect there might be some God encounters. And, you know, but I don't know, as a child, I don't know, you might just be noticing things happening around you. You know what I'm saying? Just coloring, but eventually.
I do remember one in particular where we were on the evangelistic field. We were doing, they did a series of kids crusades or revivals. So one week we may be having an adult revival, and the next week we may be, you know, setting up puppets and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing this kids crusade. I can't even remember where. It may have been somewhere in Missouri, but during the service, the tornado sirens started going off, and so everybody, you know, rushed us all into the basement, and we were all, you know, ducked and covered and whatever. And after everything was said and done, we all went outside, and there was a path of destruction up to the church and a path of destruction away from the church.
Wow.
And the church stood strong. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, seeing those things, like you're talking about, God encounters, you know,
right?
And you know, these little nuggets of of encounters and things in your life. More of those things happen than you think about. Mm-hmm. You know, some people overlook those things, and you have to have that, you know, mindset, I guess, or you have to have that vision to be able to see the things that God does all around you all the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful that my parents instilled in me, you know, I guess, I don't know if vision's the right word, but to be able to see those things as they happen. And I hope that, you know, I've been able to pass that on to my kids, that, you know, when they see God do something, they recognize that's God doing something. You know, we've had, you know, they were talking about financial difficulties. We had times in our life that, you know, we had more month than we had money.
Right. Yeah. Right.
We opened up an envelope.
Right.
One time in particular, a check from an old youth pastor years ago. Hadn't even spoke. No Facebook back then. You know, so if somebody's out of your life, they're just out of your life, right? And he said God spoke to him and said, "Send you this," and it was exactly what we needed to pay our bills. Mm. You know, those kind of things are God moments. Yeah. That if you open your eyes, you'll see those God moments in your life, and
awareness of what God's doing. You know, you know, there's a natural world, there's a spiritual world. Mm-hmm. You know, there's things going on that God can help us see.
We were talking about discipline a while ago, and to tie it into what you kind of said after that, I was talking with a young man just recently, and he was a new Christian, and he was just, you know, he was telling me, he's like, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," and I'm thinking for a second, you know, I don't find it hard at all. I mean, you know, I mean, I've been living for Christ all these years. It doesn't feel hard to me, you know. But he was really struggling, and so he was a young man that goes to the gym and works out. And so I started pulling those references, like Paul was saying. It's like, you know, and I said, you know, when you go to the gym, you know, it's hard work, right? I mean, you have to discipline yourself to go. You have to work out. You have to, whatever it is you're doing, whatever your regimens are, it's painful. But if you're seeing the benefits, and you're, you know, it's making you feel better, and it's making you, you know, you're getting toned up, and, you know, like me, you're getting toned up, and you know, you like the way you look in the mirror and stuff like that. You don't really feel the pain, and you don't really, you know, you don't have to wake up in the morning and say, I don't want to go to the gym today. You're getting up in the morning, man, I gotta eat me a protein bar so I can get to the gym, you know. Mm-hmm. Because you enjoy the journey, and you enjoy the benefits of that discipline. So when I was talking about discipline earlier, it's not, I didn't mean in a painful way, like, you know, I make myself do all this, and I want to, because I enjoy the benefits of God. I enjoy the things that He does in my life, and the way He lifts me up when, you know, man, I think made a comment just recently about, you know, some particular things making my week tough. But at the same time, God opened my eyes to so many things that week that was such a blessing. And it's like, you know what? You know, there's tough things, but God does so much more that it makes the journey worthwhile, no matter what difficulties we may face in life.
That's good.
Yeah.